Thank you, Santosh, for that excellent moderation, because he spoke with moderation. Fellow panelists and friends, I must confess that I'm not in a comfort zone when I speak to such a distinguished audience of entrepreneurs on higher education. First, I'm an educationist by accident. I think from what Santosh told you, my background is entirely different. 40 years in diplomacy and 4.5 years in education. So if you were to ask me to speak about nuclear policy or foreign affairs, I would be more comfortable. The second reason I'm not very comfortable is because higher education has literally played no role in entrepreneurial development in Kerala till very recently. Of course, Santosh spoke about the engineering university and the new measures that were taken by the government to encourage enterprise. But I must say that this has not happened in the past. Higher education was totally innocent of any kind of encouragement of entrepreneurship in the sense that we understand it in other parts of the world. So the reason for it is, of course, that our higher education sector was almost totally designed for government jobs. Maybe we'll blame Macaulay for it, but that is how the situation developed in the higher education sector. And this probably also had something to do with our concept of business. Because in Kerala, the perception was, at least during my days as a student, was that business is meant for a particular community or a group. Maybe this had something to do with our Chadurvarniyam. We all belong to professions. And if you are a Brahmin or a Kshatriya or a Shudra, you had nothing to do with business. And this was the basic approach. And later it developed into caste-wise preferences, developed into religion-wise preferences, region-wise preferences, etc. And therefore, entrepreneurship was not ever meant to be taught or inculcated in the minds of the people. And all of us, when we were growing up, wanted a salary from Lord Padmanabha. The idea being Padmanabha was ruling us and we had to earn something from his treasury. Of course, at that time we were not aware that Padmanabha was sitting on such treasures. But now I think we are aware of it, but we are moving away from that approach. Private sector was hardly heard of when I was a student, particularly in Kerala. And so our effort was always to somehow get into the government. And the education system was designed for it. Then if I am so uncomfortable, why did I accept this invitation to speak at the TiE on higher education? And as Santosh said, it is because of the reputation that TiE has. During my 10 years in the United States, I had several occasions to speak to TiE conferences, not on a specific subject because I was a diplomat and trying to tell them about the strong points and weak points of India-US relationship and the economy. And also I have a family tie with a TiE because my daughter-in-law, Rupa Unnikrishnan, was the chairman of the New York chapter of TiE. So she will be happy to hear that I got a chance to speak to the TiE here. So I spoke to you about the focus of education in Kerala and how we have seen it in the past. This is not to blame the past, but to understand the issues and try to rectify some of the shortcomings of higher education policy and how it developed. When we speak of higher education, there are 3 points which are constantly mentioned. In fact, as the vice chairman of the higher education, I had a blue flag on which it was written, expansion, equity, and excellence. These were the three slogans or the buzzwords for higher education. From this you can see that there is really no reference to employability. Certainly there is no reference to entrepreneurship. So we started off with expansion, and we have succeeded basically because Kerala's gross enrollment rate is now something like 21%, which is better than the average in India in general. Therefore, we have institutions of various kinds. Then we start about equity. And that, of course, we have more or less accomplished, not only because of constitutional requirements, but also because of our understanding that gender, caste equations and equity should be maintained, reservations and so on. And having accomplished this to some extent, then only we turn to excellence. So we are now in the stage of seeking excellence. We are asking questions as to why our colleges and universities are not the best in India, not the best in the world. How is it that our universities are not on the list of the best universities in the world, etc. So now the focus is on excellence. So what we have not yet addressed, as far as I know, is employability as well as enterprise. So employability is being addressed today because people are asking as to how many of our engineers really qualify to be employable. You hear many figures, only 25%, only 15%. So whatever it is, the percentages are mentioned as though it is normal to have education, normal to have graduates who are unemployable, or up to a certain page it is acceptable. There is the story of the UN Secretary General, Mr. Boutros Ghali. He was asked by someone, how many people work in this building? Looked at the UN building. Mr. Ghali thought for a while and said, about 50%. So we do accept that. If 25% goes to 50%, we'll all be very happy and we are willing to accept those who do not work or those who do not get any work. Entrepreneurship, hardly any emphasis has been given. In my 4.5 years in the Higher Education Council, in the terms of reforms, the only occasion when we addressed entrepreneurship was in the context of the linkages between academic institutions and the business institutions, industry. And that is the only forum where we discussed entrepreneurship. And if you, of course, the forum had several government officials, several businessmen, several entrepreneurs, and we considered this in some detail and suggested several measures to improve entrepreneurship education within the higher education sector. Again, speaking about the reforms that we tried to bring into the higher education sector, I must say that we have not been very successful in pushing some of these ideas. But we did identify some very important aspects of higher education which we thought needed immediate attention. We identified 6 areas in which we needed attention. One is infrastructure. I don't need to explain it. Our infrastructure in the universities is very poor, except in islands. Teachers training, virtually not present. Anybody has a degree can go and teach without any training. Use of technology is again very poor. Even though we have spent money on computers, most universities and colleges, they don't use them except for computer students. So this vast knowledge which is available in the world in massive open online courses, in flip school system, and so many other avenues of knowledge are not being used by the universities. And I must say, all my effort to push them to go into the knowledge that is available on the internet has not been successful, because unless you make those courses recognized for credits within our system, nobody will do these MOOC courses. Many of us sign up for it. I signed up for a couple of MOOC courses. But after a little while, you give up because it is either very tough to follow it, or we think that it is not so much relevant to you. But suppose we did integrate MOOCs courses of various universities into our system and give our students credits for it, then we will be able to make use of it. Flip schools, for example, in which in class you do what you would do at home, and at home you do normally in class, which is listening to lectures on your mobile phones rather than listening to the teachers and wasting their time day by day. Again, no takers. Everybody has a mobile phone, but nobody has lectures on their mobile phones. Autonomy, we thought, would be a very important element. We managed to introduce 20 autonomous colleges for the first time in the history of Kerala. Kerala was the only state which did not have any autonomous colleges. But now with the change of government, the autonomous colleges themselves are being strangled because the government does not believe that autonomy is of any good. So we do not know where we will go from there on that. And on research, again, very important from the point of view of entrepreneurship. How much research do we have? And what do we produce results from our research? How many patents have been received by research scholars? How many Nobel Prizes have been awarded to research projects? So these are fundamental questions. If our research had developed to patents, and if these patents were taken on board by the industry and developed it over a period of time, how much more we would have assisted entrepreneurship in Kerala and India. And then finally, the most controversial is internationalization. What we suggested was that not that universities, foreign universities should be brought to India. That was not our purpose. But what we advised our universities was to get into various aspects of collaboration with foreign universities, which are accepted and approved by the UGC, that is the University Grants Commission. Even that was considered commoditization and commercialization of education. So these last 2 points that I made, one about research and the one about internationalization, these two are very important in the context of enterprise, entrepreneurship, because it is through the acceptance of globalization alone that we can use education for the purpose of, education for the purpose of entrepreneurship. Because the universities have to reach out to the world. It is not enough that we only look at our requirements. Because if we look at our requirements without looking at the world, we'll be reinventing the wheel again and again. Because something which has already been really established and found. I don't know how many of you have seen a little video link which was on WhatsApp a few weeks ago, a short presentation by Mukesh Ambani when he defined entrepreneurship. He said when he had come back from his education after having his MBA, he went to his father and said, "Now what do I do? Give me a job." So his father said, "Do you want to be a manager or an entrepreneur?" He said, "I want to be an entrepreneur." Then he said, "Don't talk to me. Go out in the world. Find out what is it that human beings need most at this particular time. Find a particular tool or a particular instrument or a particular system or a particular process that you find is essential for mankind. Then you decide to develop it. Start your research. Find a way to meet this requirement. And then you will become an entrepreneur, successful entrepreneur." And this, I think, is a fundamental lesson for all entrepreneurs. You have to know the world. You have to know what is going around. And how many of these technologies have been developed and not used? We have been hearing stories about how somebody invented a safety razor which would last for a lifetime. It was never produced because it did not meet the requirements of the industry. We have heard about things which were developed because what happened is when a young developer or a technologist comes out with a product, he does not have the money to start a business, and therefore he goes to these established institutions. And what most of these institutions do is to buy the technology and suppress it till, I don't know this is true, many of you are entrepreneurs, so you will have first-hand experience of this. But that's supposed to be a practice. So what happens when you have an idea? Because today nobody is interested in degrees anymore. Nobody has asked any of these major inventors or the entrepreneurs of the world, what have they studied in college? It used to be our main purpose in our education, to get a degree which is recognized. Always the question asked is this degree recognized? But that is not relevant anymore. If you have an idea which you yourself can implement through a startup company or create a kind of industry out of that, that would be the best thing to do. But what happens is, basically, we are not willing to take that risk. Important is in any kind of enterprise, any kind of developing an enterprise, you need to take risks. And we know, somebody was telling me yesterday that 90% of the startups have failed because we hear about the successful enterprises, successful startups, but we do not hear about the story of many people who have succeeded in starting something, but eventually going back to work with somebody else. So,
sorry to intervene. You have 1 more minute if you can.
Is it so? It says 62.53 seconds. So I was happily going on. This clock shows I have 62 minutes.
That is for the whole session.
I think you may want to split it.
I hate to say that. That's why I think they have put me as moderator.
I'm so sorry. It's a true misunderstanding. So I didn't have enough to go for 62 minutes. So I was wondering what I would do after a few minutes. So thank you for rescuing me from that. Then I'll jump off to something else I wanted to say. For the defense of higher education, is it really necessary? Just think back at whatever you have learned in school and see whether even if you were not taught enterprise or taught new ideas, didn't many of those things that you learned in other areas, did they not come to your rescue? I did English literature all my life, 5 years. And I just sat back today and thought, did I learn anything from Shakespeare on business? And you'll be astonished to see the amount of wisdom that he has given you. I have a list, but I'm not going to read them out. But we would never think of Shakespeare as an entrepreneur, would we? But he was. How did he start writing plays? Because what he started off was as a poet, and he didn't make any money. Then what he decided was to go and write poetry for a patron. So he told him, I'll tell you how beautiful you are, how handsome you are, how rich you are. I'll write a poem and give me some money. So it was very nice, like all of us do, serve somebody else. But he said there was not enough money. So what he did was, he went to a theater and purchased a share in it. Because he said, one person cannot satisfy my needs. And then he decided to develop a theater group. He was not a writer at that time. And into that theater group, he invested money. And then he proved so many valuable points about business through his own experience. Like, for example, he proved that you cannot work for one person. He proved that you need to have new ideas to perpetuate it, because you will not be able to do one thing which will be imitated by others. He shifted the Globe Theatre from the place where it was to another place because he thought that would attract So you have to have your own successful atmosphere. So a lot of things. I'd request you to look into some of these things that, of course, we always think about Merchant of Venice when we talk of. And in fact, Shylock says at some time that I cannot have a bad plan and become a good villain. The villain should have a good plan. So even these theories that he has given. But anyway, I'll stop here because it's time. But the point I was trying to make is that it is true higher education has not done enough to promote enterprise. But if you really look into the kind of learning that we have, I think all of you have developed something or the other out of the basic education. So you cannot really blame higher education for not teaching you enough. But certainly, now we have reached a stage when we do encourage enterprise, and that is the way to go, because Santosh asked us to tell you what we could do, particularly the entrepreneurs. You have to take interest in higher education. You have to tell the higher education administrators what you need from your graduates. Then you will get it. But then you will have to put your money where your mouths are. And that is what happens in many other societies. So my advice is, get into the higher education system, try to modify it to suit entrepreneurship. Thank you very much.